Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you enjoy this legal education content, and today may be the day I earn your subscription. For today's case, we're dealing with the police choking someone until they passed away. And we're saying that the police did it excessive force. This is the case of Fermin Vincent Valenzuela versus the city of Anaheim. In this case, the city of Anaheim Police Department thought a guy doing his laundry in the laundromat was suspicious or something, and then chased him down and choked him to death. And then also, the family sued and they won. They won a judgment. But the police think that they shouldn't be awarded damages for the wrongful death. They don't think they should get that damage. So we're going to determine whether or not the judgment from the jury awarding damages for the wrongful death is legally tenable. Let's get started with this. On July the 2nd of 2016, the Anaheim Police Department received a 911 dispatch about a suspicious person near a laundromat in Anaheim. The dispatcher described the person's appearance and indicated no weapons had been seen and noted it was unknown whether they were on drugs. Arriving at the scene, the officer spotted the suspect and followed him into the laundromat, where they observed him moving clothing from a bag into a washing machine. Super suspicious. As they approached, the officer said he heard the sound of breaking glass and saw what he recognized as a methamphetamine pipe. Wolf asked the suspect whether he was all right and if he just broke a pipe or something. The suspect replied he was good and just trying to wash his clothes, so, fine. One of the police officers claimed he saw a screwdriver in the suspect's bag, so he ordered him to stop and put his hands behind his back. The suspect stepped away from the bag but did not immediately comply. Wolf then grabbed the suspect's right arm and tried to pull behind his back. Almost immediately after, another officer put the suspect into a chokehold as one of the officers tried to maintain control of hands. So, yeah, this is not going well. We have a guy doing his laundry in a laundromat, and apparently there's a screwdriver in his bag. So, that's okay. And the police say, put your hands up, and then they start choking him. They just put hands on him and start choking him. So, that's weird. So, okay, let's read on. A violent struggle ensued, with one of the officers continuing to choke hold, while the officers managed to knock the suspect to the floor face down. The officer then initiated a second chokehold, and the suspect started turning purple and repeatedly screamed, "I can't breathe and help me." The officer then tased him, who then jumped to his feet and ran out of the laundromat. The officers chased after the suspect, pulling off some of his clothes as he tried to escape and knocking him to the ground. The officers repeatedly tased the suspect, who begged for them to stop it. This is going just super well. Despite multiple chokeholds and taser attacks, the suspect ran across the street with officers in pursuit. Out of breath, he repeatedly asked the officers, "Please don't, and don't kill me." He managed to make it to a convenience store parking lot where he tripped and fell to the ground. While on the ground, the officer placed him in yet another chokehold. Again, he started turning purple, repeatedly screamed, "Help me," and "Stop it." And he was audibly gasping for air. Sergeant Gonzalez, a supervisor officer, arrived on the scene and encouraged the police officers to hold that choke and put him out. So the police sergeant says, just keep up with the choking. And he also gave him tips on how to accomplish this. Okay, so Wolf, the police officer, maintained the hold for between 1 and 2 minutes as other officers held down the suspect's arms. Towards the end of the encounter, Gonzalez asked Wolf whether the suspect was able to breathe. Gonzalez told the officers to roll him on his side because he was going to wake up. No. The suspect never did wake up. He fell into a coma and he died 8 days later in the hospital. The Orange County medical examiner ruled the manner of death as a homicide, which was caused by a complication of asphyxia during the struggle with law enforcement while he was under the influence of methamphetamine. So, yeah, this has just gone super duper well at every possible stage. This has gone super duper well. The police are called to a laundromat because someone is behaving suspiciously. When the police arrive, the suspicious behavior is doing laundry. They think that they heard the breaking of a methamphetamine pipe. And he said, "Are you okay? Did you break something?" He says, "I'm just trying to do my laundry." And then apparently there was a screwdriver in the bag. So the police apparently perceived this as a massive threat and decided to try to arrest him. And the arresting took the form of choking and tasing as the guy runs and begs for his life to stop with the choking and stop for the tasering. And then he arrives at a convenience store parking lot where he falls down, and the officers continue choking him. Then a sergeant, who is a supervising officer, arrives on the scene and says, "Keep on choking," and gives tips on how to effectively choke. He'll wake up. He didn't wake up. So, this has gone really, really well. Really just super well. I'm really sensing a great concern for the preservation of life here by the Anaheim Police Department. Valenzuela's father and children filed lawsuit under 1983 and California law for excessive force and wrongful death. After a 5-day trial, so this did actually go to a trial, the jury awarded the Valenzuela family a total of $13.2 million in damages on multiple theories of liability. And critically for our purposes, this also included a $3.6 million award for the loss of life. So, yeah, the qualified immunity was denied. It went to a jury. The jury held a trial. They said, this is bad. This is $13.2 million of bad. It seems like, the least that someone can do. But critically, that includes a $3.6 million award for the loss of life. And they say, hey, you can't do that. You can't award them damages for loss of life. Okay. So the Court of Appeals has to decide whether or not the damages should be subtracted by $3.6 million, whether that award was lawful. Okay, let's review that. In the post-trial motions, the defendant argued that because California state law does not recognize loss of life damages, apparently, neither should the federal law. No. The district court disagreed. After reviewing the relevant circuit law, the court concluded that the 1983 cause of action permits the recovery of loss of life damages, and California state law, to the contrary, was inconsistent with the federal statute's goals. As the court recognized, to hold otherwise would undermine a vital constitutional right against excessive force. Perversely, it would incentivize officers to aim to kill the suspect rather than just harm him. Yeah, so if you don't get damages for loss of life, then the most reasonable thing the officers could do would just be to take your life. And then they wouldn't be liable for anything. So, yeah. California law forbids recovery for decedent's loss of life, apparently. So here's the relevant California law. The law provides in an action or proceeding by a decedent's personal representative or successor in interest on decedent's cause of action. The damages recoverable are limited to the loss or damage the decedent suffered or incurred before death, including any penalties or punitive or exemplary damages the decedent would have been entitled to recover had the defendant lived, and do not include damages for pain, suffering, or disfigurement. So California is really, really tight on this for some reason. Okay. And then the court notes, because the relevant federal law is silent as to this issue, California law would control our inquiry unless it is inconsistent with the policies of the 1983. We conclude that it is, mindful that 1983 was meant to be a remedial statute and therefore should be broadly construed to provide a remedy against all forms of official violation of federal rights. So, yeah, in the absence of clarity, you're supposed to read the state law, but unless it's inconsistent with the federal law. And yeah, because this is supposed to be remedial. Under color of law, a government official has done a bad, and you should recover for all of the bad they did under the federal law. It makes logical sense to me. So, yeah. Our analysis begins and largely ends with a prior case. In this case, we addressed whether the prohibition of pre-death pain and damages prevented the 1983 cause of damage. We recognize that one of Congress's primary goals in enacting 1983 was to provide a remedy for killings unconstitutionally caused or acquiesced in by state governments. And in that case, where victims die quickly, there would not be a remedy at all under the state law. So yeah, apparently in California, if you just kill someone, you can't sue because they wouldn't have suffered, right? If you just do the proverbial, gunshot to the back of the head, as it were, You can't recover in California, apparently, because there's no pain and suffering. So, okay, that seems strange to my mind, but all right. Because California's bar on this relief has a perverse effect of making it economically advantageous for a defendant to kill rather than injure, yeah, we held that it clashed with the remedial purpose and undermined deterrence. The law does not apply to 1983 claims where death was caused by a violation of federal law. So, I'm not sure what California was thinking on this one, but no, not so much. Prohibiting loss of life damages would run afoul of the remedial purpose as much, or even more, than the ban on pre-death pain and suffering. Following the prior case, we therefore hold this prohibition is inconsistent with 1983. The defendant's attempts to distinguish the prior case from the current one falls flat. First, defendants argue the injury in this case is different because, unlike pre-death pain and suffering, a person cannot experience the phenomenon of being dead. Cute. But we've already rejected this quasi-metaphysical argument when we endorsed the Seventh Circuit's analysis, which identified the rationale behind Wisconsin's restrictive statute that the victim, once deceased, cannot practically be compensated for a loss of life to make it whole, so therefore we shouldn't compensate them at all. And in light of 1983's raw remedial purpose, rejected the state law anyway. So, the fact that the dead guy can't experience anything, that therefore we shouldn't give any award, that seems very odd. Second, the defendants contend that even if damages in this case are already adequate, so you already got enough, even if the Valenzuela family could not recover the $3.6 million in the loss of life award, they would still receive $9.6 million. So, hey, that's totally good. But the above awards address different injuries. One can endure pain and suffering separately from dying, while another can die painlessly and instantly. Yeah. To further the purposes of 1983, the rules governing compensation for injury caused by deprivation of constitutional rights should be tailored to the interests protected by the right in question. Additionally, such framework would preclude recovery for the decedent who is penniless, without family, and killed immediately on the scene. That reading is not tenable. Yeah, that doesn't seem right. If 1983 didn't cover loss of life, then every time an officer killed someone just flat out, there would be no damages. So, Finally, the defense argue that loss of life damages are too speculative. Because juries have never experienced death. That's a clever argument. I kind of laugh at its horror. It's like, hey, the jury can't possibly determine how bad death is because they've never experienced it. But juries are regularly asked to assess damages without direct sensory experience of the issue before them, including in this case for pre-death pain and suffering. And still better for juries to decide whether a plaintiff has received sufficient compensation than for our court to draw arbitrary lines denying the compensation entirely. Yeah. At the bottom, defendants ask us to overrule a prior case. This is outside of our authority as a three-judge panel, but also inconsistent with the goals recited by the Supreme Court, therefore affirmed. Yeah, I like that ender fail. So by that logic, a jury can't judge a murderer, as they're never likely to know what a murder's like. Actually, it's even slightly worse than that, because a jury can't possibly know what it's like to be a murderer, one would hope. So therefore, how can they possibly judge the murderer? I mean, they don't know what it's like to live that life. They have no experience being a murderer. Who are they to judge? The jury, as a jury of one's peers, should be only people who have already committed murder, so they understand what murdering is like. This is interesting. Yeah. Thus, this is the end of the case from the Ninth Circuit of Fermin Vincent Valenzuela versus the city of Anaheim. In this case, Valenzuela was trying to do laundry. This was apparently suspicious for some reason. The police came. They saw a screwdriver in his bag and then decided to choke him to death. A jury awarded many dollars of compensation. And they say, well, we shouldn't be held liable for that wrongful death because state law. And the Court of Appeals says, no. That's really interesting that you don't have a remedy under state law, which seems bizarre to my mind, but okay. But yeah, whether or not you have a remedy under federal law is surprisingly enough a matter of federal law. And it's supposed to be making everything better so much as it can. And so you can recover for everything. So, yeah. So pay the $13 million and, maybe not, don't do that next time. And at least for a moment, that brings the end of the discussion of this case. Thank you so much for being part of the Uncivil Law family. If you enjoyed this legal education content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. We appreciate your continuing support. And until later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.